My name's Diana, and I'm an alcoholic. There's one who has all power. That one is God. I've decided that I may need to move out here to Laughlin for 2 reasons. You're going to be a good crowd, I can tell that. There's good water pressure. I never saw anything like it. I got in the shower this morning and every hair that was going to fall out in the next 6 months went down the drain. I mean, I love to get in the shower at home and act like it's a water pick, you know, and kind of open my mouth and let the water run in on my teeth. I told Bob if I did it here, it would have blown my gums off. But there is a more serious reason I decided I should move here. Yours says God granted me the serenity. Have you noticed that? It's past tense on your brochure. God granted me the serenity, and I'm still asking. So, it's definitely a higher level of AA out here. I looked at that, and I looked at that. Seriously, I speak some, and I've been to a few conferences, quite a few, and this is a wonderful blessing to be here. I can't tell you that every conference is special, because some conferences don't seem very special to me. I've been places where they were kind of cold to the speakers, and I just didn't feel the magic as much. But I'm telling you, we were warmly greeted off the airplane, and I have been treated so wonderfully ever since, and there is just a magic here. I was at that call-up meeting last night, and I heard more years of sobriety in that hour and 20 minutes than I probably have heard in the last year anyplace else. I mean, people were just up here one after the other with 15, 20, 25, 30 years of sobriety, and maybe you all take that for granted here in this tri-state area, but that's a big deal. I've been sober since June 10th, 1982, by the grace of God. I use the word God, and you can translate that in your mind. It's just the 3-letter word I use for the cosmic power, the spiritual force, the underlying foundational supplier of grace in the universe. I spoke at the Indian conference in Tulsa just here recently. It can be the great white spirit, it can be anything. But I'm going to call it God, and we'll all know what I mean. And my story is very typical as to what it was like. I started drinking when I was a teenager. I grew up in a very normal home. I want to say functional, but I just have a thing about those psychobabble words. I hope I'm not stepping on any toes, but I'm not here to tell you about my boundaries. And I'm not going to be able to tell you about my issues. And my sponsor, this is just me, I'm not speaking for Alcoholics Anonymous, this is Diana's opinion. My sponsor that I listened to told me that I'd done everything my little inner child was telling me to do till I was 31 years old, that I better put her in a closet, sit her down in a small chair, and close the door. I grew up in a nice home, a stable home. My parents were married, only to each other and married forever, and I had a sister and a brother, very small family. Really didn't have any aunts and uncles we were close to, no cousins really. All my grandparents but one died before I was born. I had one great aunt, my Aunt Maud, that was beloved. She was like my grandmother to me. And then my parents and my sister and brother. I started drinking beer in high school, and like all of us, I look back and I realize it wasn't even normal then. I was always very concerned when I got to the party where the beer was, how much beer there was. I went kind of breezing through high, didn't care who was there, but I'd always ended up in front of the refrigerator or by the keg to make sure there was going to be enough. And I soon learned that another way to reassure that little need was to get a six-pack and drink it before you went. And then, even if there wasn't enough, you didn't need quite so much. I I don't know where it came from. I found out since that my grandfather died at 54, probably from alcoholism, and that there was some alcoholism in my family. It wasn't my parents. They drank 2 cocktails, 2 highballs every night. It's unimaginable to me.
But, I don't care. I don't care where it came from or how it descended on me or if I caught it off a bar stool or drank my way into it or was born an alcoholic. It doesn't matter. I know what kind of destruction it wrought in my life. And I know that without this program, I wouldn't be here. It is such an honor. And speakers really mean it when they say it's really an honor to be someplace, that people would invite me to come and tell them about my life and my experiences with this higher power. To think that I have anything that's happened to me that you're interested in is an amazing thing, because I spent a lot of drunk years wanting to tell everybody what happened to me and what I thought about everything, and no one listened. And they sure as hell didn't invite me anywhere, to any bars. Come on down, Diana, and have 10 or 12 drinks and tell us about your life. Okay. And I'll write it out on a napkin, too. I'll solve all the world problems, and I won't be able to read the napkin the next day. These are adjusted for a midget. I don't need microphones. They'll just have me speak at every meeting if the system breaks down. I kept on drinking, and looking back, by working the steps, I had the typical feelings, very much the little girl that was different, and not different in a good way. I was different in an unpleasant way, and I was very overweight as a child and had severe buck teeth. Buck enough to get me in a national magazine before and after. And here I was, this little buck-toothed, fat little girl, and I was a bookworm. And I didn't fit in. That was all on the outside. I really didn't fit in on the inside of me. I looked at other children, and this went on through my teenage years and somewhat today. And that feeling of well-being, of happy-go-luckiness, that let's just play, we're just here right now, let's just live our life right now. I've never had that feeling. I always say I was born wringing my hands, worrying, and that I was like a rubber band who was just stretched too tight, stretched till if you twisted it one more time, it'd double over on itself and self-destruct. And when I found alcohol, it eased that rubber band back off. It unwound me just a little bit, and it was worth any price, and I paid a great price, and it was worth it. Because I felt like I could see that life was more serious than other people realized, and that there were more things to worry about and try to control than other people realized. And I just didn't feel like I belonged here, and like there was going to be a place for me and air for me to breathe, and that someone was going to take care of me, or some force. I felt like I needed to fight for my rights, fight for my spot, but I didn't feel like I deserved any rights or any spot. I went to church. My parents took me to church every Sunday. I've had a belief in a higher power, and a kind and loving higher power that cared about me all my life. That didn't work. Didn't work. When I was 31 and I got here, it was not operative. It did not help me live my life as a human being here on this earth. I didn't have the power. I don't have the power today to live my life, to get through my days, to get through my decades, to get through the way my mind is turned, to get through my alcoholism, to live through the joys and the sadnesses and the ups and downs of a human being life on planet Earth. I can't do it. And I'm so glad that struggle started ending when I was 31. I don't think I'd still be alive. As I said, I always did real well in school with a little buddy bookworm show. And I graduated from high school and eventually started college at the University of Tulsa. I was probably pretty much a daily drinker by then, but I had no idea I was in any trouble with it. My other big mental problem was men, and I always had to have a man. And I'm sure there's plenty of people in here that relate to that, and maybe men are the same way. Some of you have that same tendency, or did. I'm sure none of us still do. Maybe that guy that stood up in less than 30 days, but it'll go away soon. I just had to have, it was like I wasn't anything by myself. Of myself, I am nothing. It's the man that doeth the works. I had to have someone. I had to have that, and I had to have alcohol. And if I had those two things, everything was in place, and I could go forward. And I got married when I was 21. The stupidity and ignorance of it is beyond description. I had how I was raised in this fairly stable home, and went to church every Sunday and hadn't grown up any more than I had by the time I was 21 is lost on me. My criteria was that this guy drank as much as me and he was much taller than me. And he was. I'm real tall. And that's pretty much it. I didn't think about his spiritual beliefs. I didn't think about how he handled things or anything that matters. Just very surface skimming thing, and I married this guy. And I look back now and I probably married him because he was willing to marry me. And that's a pattern in my life of not choosing or not letting God guide me to things, but just grabbing whatever's there. Just grab it, take it. If it doesn't turn out to be what you want, throw it away. And fear. I've lived with a lot of fear, and I'd love to report to you today that I'm free of that fear, but it would be a lie. It's certainly better, and I don't have to live out of it and react to it today. But I married this man, and we drank together for 3 hard years, drank and fought, and I knew just shortly after I married him I wasn't going to stay married to him because, to me, love was an investment. It was not a commitment. And I'd made a poor investment. The guy didn't make enough money to drink as much as he did, so our net profits weren't too good. So I woke up one morning and he had that drunken drool coming out of his mouth, and I'm sure I looked lovely. And I divorced him. And I immediately met another man in a bar, and 11 days later I married him. Because my judgment, is so much more mature at 24. I was totally arrested someplace back there. My development, my maturity, my ability to use tools or spiritual help or anything beyond what's right here in this skin was totally unavailable. I didn't know anything important about anything. I can tell you right now, by the time I get to the end of my story, you're going to realize that I have been to school for 19 years. I have a doctorate's degree in law. And everything I learned that ever mattered, I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. The rest of it's fluff. It's convenience. But everything that matters, I learned right here. I married this next man, and we, again, didn't have any children, and I stayed married to him for 3 years before he woke up when I noticed the drool. And couldn't deal with him either. He drank a lot. But, neither one of these men were abusive to me. I was lucky. I didn't have any real horrible tales to tell, except those I brought on myself. And I divorced him after 3 years, daily drinker now. I'm drinking scotch and soda every night, having no idea that I'm in any trouble with it. I did wake up sometimes in the morning and feel bad because I drank so much the night before, but I had the same reaction to that as I do if I'd eat an entire chocolate cake or I eat too much at Thanksgiving dinner and you're sick. You don't think you're a bad person or food has become a big problem for you. You just know you're sick and you're going to take some Tums or something and you're going to throw up or lay down and you're going to get better. And that's pretty much how a hangover was to me. It wasn't a moral issue or my life falling apart or alcohol taking over in its insidious way. It was just a hangover. Well, at the end of 3 years, I got rid of him too and married my boss. I had gone into real estate. And real estate, or any kind of sales, I suppose, unstructured employment situations are ideal for alcoholics. And I didn't sell much real estate, but I was in real estate. And I moved around a lot. I talked a lot of deals in a lot of bars, and we didn't close many, but we did a lot of deals. While I was married to that sometime, it's kind of a blur, as you can imagine, at 27, 29 in there, I decided that I needed a child. And I had, miraculously, an opportunity immediately placed in front of me to adopt a little baby that was going to be born in Arkansas, a real rough background. Drugs and alcohol, supposedly he was biracial. Nobody wanted this kid. The woman was 19. It was her 5th or 6th child. And if I would send over there and get her, bring her here, pay her medical expenses, I could have the baby. And I did that. And I believed at that time, I guess I was 27, that love would fix everything. And there's probably a lot of you that still believe that. But I have learned in this 14 years of sobriety that love won't fix everything, especially when it comes to kids. I adopted that little boy. A little boy was born. His name was John. And he almost died when he was born, but he pulled out of it and he lived. He's 20 today. And 2 years later, I had the opportunity to adopt another child that hadn't been born yet with a similar background. And I adopted my second son, Paul, who's 18 today. Through all of this, I drank. Now, when they put John in my arms at the hospital, he'd almost died in intensive care, and I intuitively knew that getting drunk every night, suddenly I had this little baby that barely weighed 5 pounds in my arms. I quit drinking. I don't remember for how long. It was a long time ago. Maybe a month, maybe 3 months. But I just completely quit drinking. I had to get up every hour and a half and feed this little premature baby, and my husband was drinking. He couldn't help. I did okay, and I bonded with that child. By the time I was 29 and I brought Paul home, Paul weighed like 8.5 pounds the day after he was born, and he was a big strapping baby that could sleep through the night within a week. And I don't think I ever quit drinking. And I don't think I could have quit drinking under any circumstances. I was 2 more years down the road. Whether or not that, the fact that I was so much deeper into my alcoholism in Paul's early months or not has affected him and caused some of his problems, I don't know. Many of us sitting in this room know the guilt of alcoholic parenting. And we know, even when our sponsors tell us and people tell us it wasn't our fault, we had a disease, we're not bad people, that pain's down in there. And it's still in there for me. But if you keep coming around, I will tell you what can happen. There is one who has all power. My life up to this point was a whirlwind of self-created problems, one crisis after the other, drinking every night, not maturing in any way, emotionally or spiritually, just learning more and more about fear and that cancerous emptiness that grows inside a practicing alcoholic year after year, just piling up that time, deeper feelings of futility and uselessness, and that it didn't matter because all of life is useless, and not believing in anything, and that hopelessness that sets in on us. And my life kind of went on fast forward all of a sudden, and these events are what brought me to my knees. When I was 29 or 30, right after I'd brought Paul home from the hospital, my father became desperately ill. I was very close to my parents. He became desperately ill, and he had a disease that killed him 16 months later. But during that 16 months, I was still married to my third husband. I have to number them. It's hard to remember their names. Actually, I don't want to remember his name. Worm comes to mind. During that time, my father had to have blood donations of parts of blood to keep him alive, and he lived longer than they thought he would. And when he was about 8 or 9 months into this disease that had killed his bone marrow, I became the only possible donor for him. So I had a little boy that was about 2 and a baby that was a few months old. My husband's 4 daughters had come to live with us. They were 16, 15, 14, and 11. And I was going to fix them, for those of you in Al-Anon family groups. Love would fix them all. I'd buy them all new jeans. I had some money. I was pretty financially successful. I started managing real estate, and I always managed things better than I sold them, so. I thought if they had clean clothes and hot meals on the table every night, they'd all be fixed. I was going to fix everything, kind of a Mother Teresa syndrome. And my father, I turned out to be the only donor that could still give him platelets and keep him alive, so they had to do these pheresis procedures on me every week where they put catheters in your arms and spin out 8 units of your blood. It takes 4 hours, and they take what your recipient needs. So I was in a very strange position for an alcoholic or anyone. My father's life depended on my life, and my platelet count, literally. And they told me, don't take any aspirin, you can't thin your blood or anything. They had this list of things I couldn't do, but never dawned on me to tell them I was drinking a 5th of scotch every night. My dad probably had a pretty pleasant passing because, he'd be in the emergency room bleeding, and they'd be giving him those platelets, and his whole mood had changed. And only now I realize he's probably getting drunk from taking my blood. And truthfully, I just kept right on drinking through those months. And I paid homage to the situation by not taking aspirin when I had a hangover. It never dawned on me not to drink. I just had to suffer through it. But I was managing everything, my business, my husband's business, all those kids, and my mother and my father's illness. And in the middle of all this, my platelet count, my hematocrit dropped so much they wouldn't put me back on the machine. They found out I was pregnant. And they gave me a choice to either continue the pheresis without the baby, or my dad was going to die. He would bleed to death within about 21 days. Well, for someone with no maturity, who kind of suspected life was futile anyway, running scared, trying to raise 4 step children and 2 little boys that were pretty messed up, desperately afraid, that's not a pretty picture when you have no tools, no power really that's greater than you, that's going to pay any attention to your problem, no sponsor to turn to, nobody with any spiritual depth. And I chose to have an abortion. I gave up the baby, which hurt a lot. My father died anyway, and I felt like I'd made a real bad deal. And my brother at that time couldn't donate because he was a drug addict and had moved away, and he'd had hepatitis several times. And my sister, by the time my father was ill, had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. A very ravaging case of it, was in a nursing home. So I was the only donor. So I gave up the baby, and then Daddy died, and I felt desperate. I felt like life was spinning now out of control. And I didn't care how out of control my life was and what merry-go-round I was on, as long as I was getting on it and picking a horse. That was okay. But when it was just flinging me around right and left, that wasn't okay. And I drank more, and I found Valium. And it really was a wonderful situation for an alcoholic, because you could feel so sorry for yourself, and other people did too. They did. I mean, you didn't even have to hide your drinking or anything. It was just like you could just go around with your tongue this thick from taking Valium, and people would worry about you. 89 days after my dad died in May, and in December I went to my mother's house and found her dead in her bed. And 89 days after my mother died, my beloved Aunt Maud, who was like my only grandparent, died. And that series of 4 losses in that short period of time threw me into an indescribable tailspin and feeling of emptiness, and that life wasn't worth living. I felt like it wasn't worth living, but I wasn't gonna die and be relieved of it either. And I drank, and I took tranquilizers, and I drank some more. I'm told I drank around the clock at one point. I think, looking back and thinking about what some counselors and psychologists said to me, I probably had a nervous breakdown. I was in bad shape. I was in real bad shape. It was ugly. And I couldn't get a grip on life or any part of my day or night. Nothing in the visible world, nothing in the invisible world could I get a handle on and feel safe. Every tiniest speck of safety I'd ever felt was gone, and the fear was overwhelming. And at that time, my second husband called me, and he said, I want you to meet me for some coffee. I need to talk to you. And we were friends, and I went and talked to him, and he said, I'm an alcoholic, and I've gone to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've come to believe from this that we don't just even do our 9th step for ourselves. I don't think I probably said anything gracious to this man, like, oh, I forgive you and all that. He might not have even thought that 9th step was well received, that amends, but he saved my life because he worked the steps of this program. I realized when he was talking to me and telling me that our 3 years of hell marriage were his fault, and that he drank too much, that he wasn't talking about my drinking. And every drink that man drank, I drank one too. Plus everything I snuck in the kitchen, so by God, if he was an alcoholic, I had a problem. And I told him, I said, well, then maybe I have a problem too. Where can I go? And he told me where a meeting was, a noon meeting. And I went to it the next day. It was in June or July, hot summertime. I drove up in my new Cadillac. I think I had a mink coat on. I know I had on all my jewelry, and it was a very significant amount of expensive jewelry. Because I wanted you all to know, like I wanted everyone to know, that I had it together. And my pantyhose were probably down around my ankles, and I probably hadn't shaved my legs in 3 weeks, and had on 1 earring instead of 2. There's just no telling how it was. But by God, I had it together, and you knew it. Well, I almost didn't get out of the car, but there was a man walking across the parking lot, and he had the nerve to come up to me and ask me if I was looking for the AA meeting. The truth is, my husband was with me, number 3, and I figured he had spotted worm and knew he needed an AA meeting. So I swaggered in under the weight of all this fur and jewelry. Oh, it was hot. And the meeting room was not air conditioned, and I did not feel at home. I didn't go in, I'm serious. People go in and they say from the podium, I just felt at home. I was so relieved and all this. I didn't have any of those feelings. I was too sick for that. I was too unloving and too unlovable at this point to get any relief. And I went to noon meetings for 3 months. I never went to an evening meeting because I knew that's where the bad drunks went. I knew that the lighter drunks went at lunchtime, and the people who just couldn't keep from drinking at night had to go to those nighttime meetings. I didn't even think about going to one of them. But I'm going to tell you now about something that's very serious to me. There's magic dust in Alcoholics Anonymous. When you come in the door, when you came in that door, there is magic dust that fell on you. And if you put your arms out in this room and you pay attention to your bare arms, you will feel that magic dust. And it's going to get on you. Whether you stay with us, whether you go out and try to shake it off, you can't wash it off, that magic dust is on you. And I used to talk about this magic dust only at women's conferences because I thought they better would understand it. But I slipped a few months ago at a co-ed conference and talked about it. And I thought, God, I hope the men don't just think that's so silly. There was a man there with like 50 years of sobriety, and he came up to me the next morning when I was eating breakfast after I'd spoken the night before, and his name's like Pappy or something. He's real famous in Texas. And he said, honey, you know what that dust is, don't you? He had his little breakfast tray leaned over me, and I thought, oh my God. And I said, no, I don't. And he said, it falls off those angels' wings when they're flying around over us in those meetings. And it does. I realize that now. I very much believe in angels, or whatever you want to call them. There's forces on this earth we don't see, or we don't see all the time. And they are flying around in this room, literally over your heads. And angel dust is falling on you. And it will change your life eventually. If you stay alive, it will change your life. And that dust got on me. I didn't work the steps. I didn't listen to what you said at those noon meetings. I didn't like you. I didn't fit in. But just the dust alone, the magic, the magnetism of a group of alcoholics and Alcoholics Anonymous kept me sober, and I was a bad drunk at that point for 90 days. At the end of 90 days, I kind of did a self-survey and assessed my position in life and decided that I was on the verge of becoming an alcoholic. That I was just right on the edge, and that, 30 years old, I think about 30 at that point, and I better really be careful and control my drinking. So I went back out for 9 months, and it was an ugly, long, hard 9 months. It took me 9 years to live that 9 months because I couldn't get the dust off of me. Oh, I stuck my big book way far away, and I didn't talk to you all if you called, and I didn't even drive down the street where I'd gone to those noon meetings every day. Could never get all the dust off. It got uglier and uglier in our home, as it does in an alcoholic home. The fights were worse and worse and more violent. I started having casts on my hand. I'd get it off and have a cast on my arm. And alcoholism in a home, in a family, is like black smoke to me. No matter if you shut the doors and the windows and put towels down and tape and everything, it seeps in somewhere. It's like a creeping, insidious ugliness in a family that just covers everything. And it was a truly ugly marriage. And my children were about 3 and 5 at this point. And one night, my husband and I had a particularly bad fight after they went to bed, and he came out with a .38 loaded with hollow point bullets. And I think maybe he was going to kill himself, but I struggled with him for the gun, and it went off, or he shot at me, and it went through my hair, the grace of God. It went through my hair and lodged in blew out through the grass cloth wallpaper in our lovely home. And I turned around, and my children were standing in the door, and they had watched it. And that was my moment of truth. God help me. At that moment, my life had become everything I didn't want. I had become everything I didn't want in every area, and now with these little boys that I truly loved. I was all they had. I knew they didn't really have a father in this man. My family was gone. And this is what they're looking at. And by God, that was not the way it was supposed to be. It was the furthest thing from the way it was supposed to be. And I truly realized I wasn't capable of living my life with any success. I tucked them in bed, and I told them it'd never be like this again, and I went back to AA the next day. And that was June 10th, 1982. They say you can't come in AA for anything but yourself, but I say come to the meetings for any reason at all. I don't care if you come looking for someone to date. If you'll just sit down, magic dust is going to fall on you. Any reason is good enough. Just be here. I mean, there's as many people as there are in this room. There's that many reasons they came here. Who cares? The dust will get you. It's at this point that I can tell you that all my story up till now is in one word, and all my story that I'll finish telling you is in one word. It's the same word. It's grace. It's the grace of God. I define grace as unmerited divine assistance that's been given to me for my regeneration. Unmerited. I was tired at 31 of trying to deserve anything, and I'd messed up bad enough when I got here to be able to fool myself that I deserved anything. It's unmerited. This grace is so big and so plentiful that the angels and God and the force of the universe that provides this grace is just waiting for us at the slightest way to open our hands to receive it. Unmerited. Divine assistance. We all know that there's nobody that can help us when we're at the end. There's nobody. It's divine. It's bigger than us. It's bigger than anything we can imagine. We finally can fall against something that's the rock. Unmerited divine assistance, given as a gift. It's not earned, it's given like a parent that prepares a precious Christmas gift for a child. I really believe that God just can't wait for us to receive this grace, given to us for our regeneration. I love flowers and I love roses, and anyone who's ever heard a tape of me is going to have to suffer through this again, but I love roses and rose bushes that are verdant and green, and their little leaves are pretty and they're blooming and have buds on them. They don't need to be regenerated. There's thorns down in there, but they serve their purpose and they're covered with the leaves, and that rose bush does not need regeneration. But at the end of the season this fall, there will be roses out in front of Walmart on a bench, and they'll say $1 over them, and they still won't sell. And they're going to be in little plastic bags that are split open and the dirt's falling out of them. And they're going to have bare canes that are cut off, not a leaf, just thorns, that black spot. And they have little wires choking their necks that they've grown into that constraint. And they can't even sell them for $1. And they need regeneration. They need sunlight and water and tender care and fertilization and someone to believe in them. Believe that. And that's the kind of rose bush I was when I came to AA. And I'm telling you, my little wires were choking my neck. But the grace of God, the unmerited divine assistance that was given to me for my regeneration, was bigger than any problem I had created or could create, and anything life could hand me. I don't believe God gives us tests and trials. I just think life's life, and that He'll certainly give us the strength to get through whatever it is. I came back and I got sober and I did what you said, all the standard things. I've always gone to meetings. That's the one lifeline for me, is the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't believe I could have stayed sober without that, because when I was in a spiritual desert and couldn't pray, and I still go through those, and I couldn't even really maybe believe that there was a God, couldn't read my book, didn't want to talk to you, didn't want to hug people at meetings. Still, if you go to the meetings, enough magic dust is going to get on you. You're going to stay sober till it gets better. And I've always gone to meetings. That's one thing I've always done right. I worked the steps. I got a sponsor, a wonderful sponsor, and she died when I had 2 years of sobriety, and I got her sponsor. And my first sponsor, Dorothy L., was a little woman, and I was very unlovable when I got here. I was one of those women who, like my show today, I look real confident and I'm real articulate, and you'd think, boy, I'd like to be like her. She just knows what she's going to say and never stammers. But I am a very frightened, not confident person inside. And I learned this mask when I was about 3 years old, to talk loud and stomp hard, and you know, that was a good way. I don't want anyone to know how afraid I am. Well, I was ugly when I came in AA. I was ugly on the outside and ugly on the inside, and I told everybody how to do it, and I couldn't wait till it was my turn so I could interpret the step correctly. Because after all, I'd been a Bethel Bible teacher in the Lutheran Church, and you all were so inarticulate about your spiritual beliefs. And I don't know how you stood me, but you stood me. And I see women like that come in now, and men, their egos are bigger than this room, and they really don't have any belief in themselves at all. But that sponsor, that little woman, something inside me cracked the day I sat on her lap. She tricked me into this. On her lap, and I'm a big woman. On her lap, and she wrapped her arms around me and rocked me, and I cried like a baby. And she held me while I cried like an animal, finally. And I let it out, and I needed her, and I needed her arms around me, and I needed God with skin on him. And she was that for me. And the sponsor I have now, her sponsor is like my mother, and I have a family back in AA. Well, all hell broke loose after I got sober. We found out that those two little boys had all kinds of problems. And I eventually divorced my husband. My sponsor made me go to AA every week for a year. She told me I couldn't leave him for a year. And at the end of the year, I went to her and I said, okay, I've gone to Al-Anon. She made me go to Al-Anon every week for a year. And I have great respect for Al-Anon. Whoever's out there in Al-Anon family groups, AA got me sober, and I'm not sure I could have made it without Al-Anon. I have great respect for Al-Anon. And thank you for your contributions to our families, to AA, and to our sobriety. I went for a year, and I went to my sponsor and I said, now can I divorce him? Now can I divorce him? And she said, nah, you're too sick. She said, I don't like him either. And I knew she didn't. But she said, you'll just shop in the loony bin. You'll get one that's worse. She said, You have to go to Al-Anon every week for another year, and then you can divorce him. So at 2 years, I divorced him. I got permission, got rid of him. I was by myself then raising those boys, and they were 5 and 7, and the 7-year-old went to developmental kindergarten, regular kindergarten, and they kept testing him in the 1st grade, and they finally called me and they said he's retarded. He's just got problems. His IQ's very low, and I said, no, he's not retarded. I know he's not retarded. And they said, oh, adoptive parents feel that way. You know, they think this child's really special and they want it to be perfect so bad, you just can't face reality. So I knew something was really wrong, and I took him over to Oklahoma City and had him tested by a specialist there, and he's gifted. But he has 5 real severe learning disabilities, like dyslexia and dysgraphia and short-term memory impairment and all these things that can happen when mothers take a lot of drugs and shoot dope in their arms while they're carrying babies. And they're synergistic, and they told me he's gifted, but he'll never read, he'll never be able to write, and he'll never be able to do math. And I cried all the way home with him in the car and the other one, and if I had been a drunk, I would have felt real sorry for myself, and I would have accepted that. And I still have those tendencies, but I came back to Tulsa to fall into the arms of stronger women than me in Al-Anon and AA. And I did what a sober mother does. And I found him help, and I enrolled him in a school that was $600 a month that I didn't have, and tutors and just belief, you're going to read somehow. And he graduated last May from high school, regular high school. He's at the State University in Oklahoma right now. He wants to be a teacher. And he is the most wonderful young man. And if it weren't for the grace of God manifesting itself in my motherhood through AA, he would have been written off as retarded. So stay with us. If you've been a bad mother or a bad parent, stay with us. You'll get your chances. My other little boy had worse problems, and it's not as happy an ending. They thought he had alcoholic fetal syndrome at one time, and he's always had terrible problems since he was a little boy. Very oppositional, blood, gut, score, won't look you in the eye, rather lie than tell you the truth. Highly destructive. I'm starting to see heads go up and down. I'm not talking about a little boy who's all boy. And I'm not talking about a little boy who's ADHD. He was attention deficit too. I'm talking about unbelievable. Take over your whole life, your whole family is centered on that child and keeping him under some kind of control. He's going to start fires, he's going to throw rocks at the car, to kill the cat. You don't ever know what he's going to do next. And it was serious. And I became enmeshed, as parents do with a child that's this severe, just enmeshed in going to fix him. It was my fault he was like this, I'm going to fix him, and he's going to get better. And really our whole family life, John and Paul and I, centered around, I went to AA meetings, but mainly it centered around keeping Paul under control. He was kicked out of church, nurseries, AA nurseries, everything. And I took him to other states. We did holding therapy in Colorado and all sorts of things, but he just progressed. Every age he did the most things you could get in trouble at that age. There's just certain things you can do at certain ages. And when he was 9, there's a wonderful therapist, psychologist in Tulsa that we went to regularly. And I went in when he was 9. We'd come back from Colorado, and it was always like, what did he say this time? Did he draw people without feet again? Did they have blood coming off them? It was just always, how's Paul? How's Paul? And this doctor said to me, by now I'm an administrative assistant, that's glorified for a real fancy secretary, at a big company in Tulsa, so I can have health insurance on these kids and a steady income. I can't sell real estate or anything with this kid. Forget it. You've got to know right what's going on. This psychologist said to me, did you ever have a dream? I said, yes. I dream about there being enough money when the car insurance is due. I dream about getting a good night's sleep without worrying about what Paul's up doing. I dream about not being scared all the time. Yeah, I have some dreams. I mean, it made me mad. He said, I don't mean those kind of dreams. I mean, did you ever have a dream when you were little about something maybe you wanted to be when you grew up or something you wanted to do? And I reached way back for that doctor that the grace of God put in my life. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, don't talk about how you are now. You're all jaded with all these problems and everything. How were you when you were 4? I said, I loved Abraham Lincoln. He was my hero. And he said, what do you want to be? And I said, I wanted to be a lawyer like Abraham Lincoln. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. But, at 36 or 37, raising 2 kids, a little bit hand to mouth, you don't pay any attention to your dreams. He said, Diana,
we're going to think about your dreams now. We're not going to worry about Paul all the time. Paul may never be okay. He may not have the ability to be okay. Love won't fix everything. Some kids are going to grow up and they're going to have terrible problems. Terrible. They're going to do terrible things. And we don't know what's going to happen to Paul, but you have to live your life. Well, he wasn't in AA or Al-Anon, but he should have been, I guess. And he made me go, I was on my lunch hour, by the University of Tulsa and pick up a catalog to law school. And I didn't do it because I was seriously listening to him. I did it because he was real cute and I was single and I didn't want to go back and tell him I had done what he said. Now, that's being honest. I thought maybe I can impress him this way. So I went out there and I did get a catalog, and this woman saw me sneaking down there getting the catalog, and she called me into her office and she lied to me. She asked me what I was doing. I tried to explain to her my long wah-wah story about my kids, and I was just out there to get the catalog to keep the doctor happy. And she said, well, you ought to at least take a class now and then at night if you've been interested in the law all these years. And I'd graduated from college, made it real good grades. I'm just a bookworm. And I said, oh, can you do that? She said, yeah, you'll never be a lawyer, but you could just take courses at night and kind of feed yourself, nurture yourself. Well, she lied. That's not even a possibility. I don't know why she lied, but I believed her. And she said, but you do have to be accepted to the law school to even do that. So why don't you take the LSAT, the LSAT entrance exam? It was in 11 days. And I said, oh, what do you do to get ready? And she said, well, they started a course that you go to at night to get ready to take it, but it's 4 months long. It started 4 months ago. You're out. You'll just have to take it. So be careful about your dream, because it may be the most precious thing you have. And if you'll reach out and touch your dream, and that's what I was doing by even holding that catalog in my hand. If you touch your dream, you will feel better. You don't necessarily have to even accomplish it, but not being afraid of it, not being afraid of that thing you could have been, or those children you could go down and help, or volunteer work, or whatever your dream is. Don't be afraid of it, because you will be pleased with yourself and God's grace every step of the way. By the time I walked in where they gave the LSAT, the LSAT, and I plunked down $60 I dearly couldn't afford just to be a walk-in registrant and take the test, that was enough. Diana Clark would never have enough courage to do that, but I did it. And I had filled out my little entrance papers at the University of Tulsa. I never talked to him about money, never talked to him about anything. I just gave him my entrance thing, my admission application, and took the LSAT. My test scores came back, and God had taken the LSAT. I felt that when I was taking it. And I just very calmly, I'd measured out how many questions there were and when I should be at what point in the test, and I kind of took it the best I could and got up and walked out and said, by God, I don't care if I flunked it. I made the lowest score in history. I can't believe that God gave me the courage to do that. Well, as I said, God took it. It was a very, very high score. And I decided that I would really be thrilled if the University of Tulsa would send me a letter saying they accepted me. I couldn't go, but if I got the letter, that would please me. And it would have pleased me if it hadn't gone any further. I'm telling you, don't be afraid to touch your dream. Go after something impossible. You're nothing, but there's a lot of grace. The letter came from the University of Tulsa, pretty fat envelope. I unfolded the letter, and it said, Diana, you have been admitted to the University of Tulsa Law School, and we'd love for you to consider coming here, and yada, yada, yada. It was just beautiful. And the next page was a mimeograph sheet that said it was $10,000 a year tuition and $800 for books every semester, some impossible thing. But there was another sheet of paper. Underneath it, the last sheet of paper, was another letter from the University of Tulsa on their engraved letterhead. And it said, Dear Ms. Clark, the Merit Scholarship Committee is met, and we will pay your entire way to come to the University of Tulsa. And I thought, uh-oh. I'm in trouble now. Recognize that this didn't happen quickly in my sobriety. I'm not up here telling you that 6 months after I came in, I became a lawyer and I'm worth $1 million and my kids are fine. None of that happened. I think, for me, it's like putting your hand on a hot stove. If you put your hand on a hot electric stove coil, it's going to burn bad scars on your hand. And it's going to take time to find out even how bad you're burned. It's not going to look as bad at first as it really is. And when you do start treating that wound on your hand, which was my life, and I had kept my life on an electric stove, believe me, it's going to take a long time.
First, the scars are going to get redder and uglier, and that's how it was when I came in AA, and I was even more scared. And then they start calming down, and you finally get used to it, and you can't move your hand quite as well, but you can adjust, and it quits hurting so bad. But if you stay long enough and you take your medicine and put your medicine on your hand, someday you're going to look down and the scars are going to be almost gone. Your hand's going to work just as good as it ever did. It's going to take a long time, just like a burn. That's how it was for me. I went to law school. My sponsor told me I had to. I can't tell you how scared I was. I was scared. I had these 2 boys to raise. We had to sell our house, car, clear out everything and split it into 36 payments to ourselves out of a savings account so we could make it through the 3 years. And I was so scared I spent the first day going up to John Rogers Hall crying. One, because I couldn't believe I was going to law school. At this age, and with my past and drunk, going to law school, even if I hadn't made it, even if I hadn't even gone a week, how did I ever get that far? And mainly I was crying because I was so scared. I knew I'd flunk, I knew I couldn't do it, I knew something would happen with the kids, and you know, when it's you in your life and you're in that position, forget grace and God and all that, it ain't gonna be big enough. But it was big enough, and I made it through the first year of law school, and I always went to my meetings, and my sponsor said, if you make C's, it's better to make C's and be sober than make straight A's and get drunk. This is what matters. And you're not here to represent people with causes, you're going to represent God. And no matter how many lawyers there aren't that many lawyers doing that. So I went, and at the end of the first year, I had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and study before Mr. Wildman got up, Paul. And he did everything in his power to keep me from going to law school. He knew the focus was going to change from him to law school. And Al-Anon, my people in Al-Anon said, just go right on. He cannot be the center of the universe anymore. You matter, and there may be some other calling for you besides fixing this kid. So he acted like he's going to commit suicide one morning. He left a whole bunch of pills out by the coffee maker, empty pill bottles, so I'd be worried about that. And I just put him out on the curb and tell him at school as soon as you get there what happened, because I have to go take my finals today. I'm serious. And I said, if you better get out there right now. It's about 6 o'clock in the morning. And I said, because you may not have strength in another hour to crawl on that bus. And when it pulls up, you best be getting on it. And as soon as you get to school, go to the nurse, tell her what you did. So if you die in class, they can put you in that little place where the cots are, and I'll pick up your body later. He had bigger plans. Not God, Paul. So he went to school, and I broke down, of course, and cried as soon as he was out the door and called the Poison Control Center, and they said he'd live, and I was kind of disappointed. I shouldn't say that on tape. It's a program of honesty. So I took my finals, and they ranked us at the end of the first year, and here I was, a drunk, hadn't been in school in 17 years, raising 2 boys single, but those kids were out drinking, and it wasn't as serious to them as it was to me, and I was ranked number 1 in my class out of 248 students, and I thought they made a mistake. My second year of law school, they called me at 2 o'clock in the morning, one morning, the police, they said, we got your son Paul, he was 13. He's out here on the Sand Springs line in a stolen pickup with 2 loaded guns on the seat, extra clips, and bombs, fertilizer bombs, Tim McVeigh bombs in the back of the pickup. And the federal bomb squad's here and the state bomb squad, and you better get out here. I said, no, I'm not coming out there for the television programs. I'm in law school, and I've got a job secured for me, and you just take me to the police station, I'll meet you there. And I made some of the hardest decisions I've ever made in the following week or 2. They told me I had to bring him home. You know, they don't have any facilities in Oklahoma. Maybe it's different here, but no matter what your kid does, they're going to send him home if they're a juvenile. And I said, no, I won't take him home, put me in jail. I'm not taking him home. And he's a very small kid. And they said, oh, you'd have to go to detention with those big boys, and they're in gangs, and it'd be really bad. And I said, that's too bad. That's the consequences of his behavior, and he is not coming home. And I leaned down and told him to be careful and keep an eye over his shoulder. I was going. And I went home. I left him in the detention center for 12 days, and they set his bond at $50,000. And I made, of course, no attempt or bail or whatever you call it. I didn't make any difference. They'd set it at $5. He wasn't coming home. And we ended up getting him in a mental hospital, declared in need of treatment in a mental hospital for 7 months. And I just kept going to law school. On the way home from school, I'd go by and visit him at the mental hospital. And he came out after 7 months, and we realized he was an alcoholic, huffing gas. A lot of bad stuff, and that he was one of us. And when I went up there that morning at 2 o'clock, I wanted to drink.
because once again, life wasn't supposed to be like this. And I knew he had monster capabilities, but I just didn't think it was going to happen when he was 13. I didn't think it would be that bad. You know, there were people in AA who got up at 2 o'clock in the morning and took me. And I really wanted to drink when we left the police station. It was just overwhelming. I wanted relief. Man, that rubber band was tight. But you just don't say to a car full of AA people, you know, stop by and get me a six-pack. They stayed with me and made me go to a meeting at 8 o'clock the next morning. Didn't even let me go to sleep. But I probably would have drank if it hadn't been for AA. I'm not one of those people that the desire to drink was lifted out of me. I've never wanted one since. I have urges to drink and haven't had to drink because of this program. When he came out of the mental hospital, I found out that his health insurance had lapsed when I opened my $87,000 bill. And just a peace came over me. And I knew that somehow things would be handled. But I was going to law school and I was taking care of myself. It turned out the state of Oklahoma paid the bill for me. It was a miracle. He came home and he came to meetings and he probably stayed maybe clean and sober for a year, I'm not sure. And I graduated and went to work for the biggest and finest law firm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Fine in terms of the world's definition of fine. Lily White. They should have just all been wearing lily white gloves going up and down the halls because, oh my, they were prissy. I was the only single mother they had ever hired, and if they'd known I was an alcoholic, and there was another husband in there I didn't tell you about, that I'd been married 4 times and was a drunk, they would have fainted. But they didn't know anything, and they just, you know, thought I was really a trooper. I'd fought through this single motherhood and ranked real high in my class, and they hired me. And Paul stayed sober and clean off and on. He got busted at school maybe a couple of years ago, and we ended up getting him in a prison alternative ranch for boys, and he was there for 14 months and clean and sober. And I believe that he had a spiritual experience, what he's described to me there. And my tapes, if you put them chronologically, are just, you know, people are always asking me, how's Paul, and naming their little girls Paulette and kidding me about it. Many people have heard me say when I spoke, after he came out of that ranch, Paul's good and he loves me. For the first time in my life with Paul, I had a son and he looked at me with love and he looked up to me because I was in AA and we had a connection through our alcoholism and the problem that leads us to chemical addiction. And I'm grateful for that. And I said then, I've said in many talks, if I go home and find out Paul's dead, I will be grateful for the time I've had. And you got to take the good days you have with a kid like him. I found out in December that this last December, his very strange behavior was because he was using drugs again, and I put him out of my house that day. And he's in Texas with his usually gone father, and I hope he's doing well. But I'm going to be okay because of what I've learned in AA and Al-Anon. And the big thing Paul's taught me, and the grace of God given to me for my regeneration, the grace has helped me understand, is this: no one has been put on this earth to live up to my expectations. Every single person has a right to be exactly the way they are. Whether it's my father, mother, son, daughter, sister, husband, wife, they weren't put here to live up to our expectations. And they'll have to live their life. And I've come a long ways as a mother to be able to say that. And I've come a long ways to be able to say to you today that for all the shame and guilt I felt about hitting my kids, screaming at them, emotionally abusing them, I am a good mother. I'm a good mother. And I didn't think I'd ever be able to say that, and I probably couldn't say it till 2 years ago. I stood at a podium and those words came out of my mouth. And I'm telling you, it's a beautiful thing to be a drunk like I was and sit here in front of the people that I most love and respect in the world and tell you, by the grace of God, I am a good mother. I had kind of a spiritual experience maybe 3 years ago, kind of a vision, and I've always felt inadequate to speak or do this kind of service work. It scares me. I used to get diarrhea and throw up before I spoke, so you're getting a better version today. At least I'm not. You had to take Imodium the night before, and if you were asked to speak at night, you couldn't eat all day, or you'd throw it up, but you were so hungry that you felt sick.
And I've been known to rush off the stage. You know, diarrhea is a powerful force. It's cunning, baffling. But I just didn't feel adequate. And I saw in this vision what I think was the Hoover Dam. I want to go see the Hoover Dam real bad while I'm here, real badly. Was the Hoover Dam, and I was a little rusty pipe standing at the foot of this huge concrete structure, bigger than anything I could ever imagine, and roaring louder than my ears could hardly stand. And it was God. And I was this little pipe, and I was saying, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. I can't move water or make electricity or do any of this you can do. Why are you even looking at me? And crying and complaining. I'm inadequate. I'm rusted. I'm just a little pipe this tall. And the dam had a voice, and it said, lay down. And that's all you have to do. Just lay down. I don't care if one drop can go through you. That drop matters to someone at the other end. And I don't think the God I've come to know has any over amount of workers to plow his fields, so we have to all lay down. We have to lay down little rusty pipes. I've left that law firm. I went to a smaller one, and I left that firm in June, and I've become a domestic lawyer, and I practice by myself. I help who I want to. I don't have to worry so much about my billings. It's been an incredible experience, AA, Al-Anon, and being a domestic lawyer. I'm under a lot of stress every day. It's almost an unbearable amount of stress, and my fear level is just, 9 on a scale to 10. Go to court. I act just like this, boy. I'm the toughest pit bull in there, but they call me the pit bull with lipstick on. And I don't have to go to court very often because of my reputation. But I'm so scared when I go in there that sometimes I literally think about just running out the door and getting in my car and just driving as far as I can forever. So, am I up here to tell you I just love being a lawyer and my life's just whoop-de-doo-dah every day? No. But I am up here to tell you that I did lay down. And that every day when I come home, I can think of someone that me being a lawyer, it really mattered to them. I either said I'm on your side, or maybe you drink, or maybe I won't help you with your divorce till you've gone to 6 Al-Anon meetings, or I just put my arm around them and told them they'll find someone else, or their kids will be okay. But the opportunities are just there in spades, and I have a paralegal and a secretary that just, their loyalty, they show me the grace of God every day. I stand before you, a rose bush in full bloom. I'm a lady today, an attorney, a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, someone who's come further in 14 years than a human being can go, a good mother despite how my kids may turn out or not turn out. Grace, unmerited divine assistance that was given to me for my regeneration. And if I keep coming here, I will stay a rose bush in full bloom, and I plan to do that. I want to read to you, God Calling is a book from which they take the meditation part of the 24 hours a day, so it's kind of semi-approved by someone. And, well, surely, just by usage, the 24 hours a day is approved by someone. But the meditation is taken from this book each day of the 24-hour day. And on March 26th, this is what it says. I want you to think about your dream and grace. Do not look forward to changes and chances of this life in fear. Rather look to the... I've got the wrong card, sorry. I'm gonna read this to you too. This is my favorite prayer. Do not look forward to changes and chances of this life in fear. Rather look to them with the hope that as they arise, God, whose you are, will deliver you out of them. He has kept you up till now. If you'll hold fast to his dear hand, he will lead you safely through all things, and when you cannot stand, he will bear you in his arms. Do not look forward to what may happen tomorrow. The same everlasting Father who cares for you today will take care of you tomorrow and every day. Either he will shield you from suffering, or he will give you unfailing strength to bear it. Be at peace then, and put aside all anxious thoughts and imaginations. This is very similar to the March 26th, and it says, what of a man who walks through a glorious glade when beautiful flowers and vistas are all around him, but ahead he always hears the river. He always hears the river and doesn't know how he's going to cross it. And my whole life has been me hearing that river roar, when all the time the river was spanned by a bridge. And what if he had had a friend who knew the journey, who had planned every step of the way, and assured him that all would be well. There is a bridge. There is a bridge for everything. We will get through it together, holding on to each other's hands. Thank you so much for my life, and thank you for making it so worthwhile by asking me to come here and speak. I hope you go out of here with grace and the dust and your dream. Don't be afraid to touch it. Thanks.